what would you say is the most difficult and I guess thought-provoking lesson that you've learned throughout your experience in the music industry?
Um, I would just say that you pretty much get back what you put into it.
Hmm.
So, putting in time and putting in effort and putting in work and working at it on a daily basis. That's kind of what you need to break it down to is a daily thing, thinking
Hmm.
about every day, putting something into that. That tends to be what you get rewarded with in the end.
Hmm. Did you experience difficulties yourself just being consistent in your, endeavor in terms of developing career in music? Did you have times where you've been hesitant whether to go further with that, or any sort of thoughts that might have been preventing you from going further?
I would say, initially no, because you're young and you're like, whatever, I've got time. If I ever want to change my mind and do something else, I always can.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the hardest period was my younger 20s when a lot of my friends who went on and went to college and got their business degrees, et cetera, were getting jobs and buying their own places
Mm-hmm.
and starting families, et cetera. And I was just kind of this misfit guy who was like teaching lessons
Yeah.
and playing gigs on the weekends and hadn't found a lot of success yet. So that was probably the roughest period, but I don't know. I always had some level of enthusiasm for what I was doing that kind of carried me through that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Do you um, do you think, for example, that musicians nowadays maybe lack this sort of devotion towards the craft and towards career in music? Due to the overall change in the environment of the music business. So, do you in general see, what do you think are the problematics of musicians nowadays, considering the circumstances that we live in?
Well, I think it's shifted a lot. I think there's a
Mhm.
big focus right now on, um, I guess, like social media fame
Mhm.
versus like gigging fame or touring fame.
Mhm.
So a lot of the great players are the people that are spending a lot of time creating content for online.
Mhm.
I still think any of that stuff is a positive. Like anything that gets people actively involved in music, all the way down to the singing contest shows like American
Mhm.
Idol or The Voice, etc. I
Mhm.
mean, on one hand, you can bag on it and say, well, that's all about sensationalism, people hitting the
Mhm.
high notes, etc., and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, it still does get kids actively involved,
Mhm.
like it with music and seeing value in being a musician. So I don't necessarily look at that stuff like it's bad. And same with the online content, especially for guitar players, that tends to be really technically oriented these days.
Mhm.
Um, but I still think it sets a bar for people to practice and try and be, I guess, a musician on a level. So I don't necessarily think of that stuff as bad. I
Mhm.
do kind of miss the style of player that wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily like technically oriented. If
Mhm.
I take some of the examples that would come to mind would maybe be like, Angus Young, because he was such
Mhm.
an amazing performer with his bluesy style, but it was kind of built more off of a stage persona.
Mhm.
Or players like David Gilmour or
Mhm.
Alex Lifeson, guys who weren't necessarily playing anything technical, but were great guitarists.
Mhm.
That's kind of the ground that seems to be lacking more these days,
Mhm.
as most of it tends to be kind of like I said, technical, but
Mhm.
it's still good. There's some amazing players, and it's fun to see. I think as long as something is out there that inspires people to keep going in music, that's great.
Mhm.
I think it would be very helpful at some point in time to sort out the artist royalties on streaming,
Mhm.
um, in terms of fairness for people to be able to generate a career in music. you
Mhm.
know, not necessarily for myself at this stage of the game, because I've had a nice career and, um, you know, and I'm doing fine.
Mhm.
But if I was a kid starting out, it would be more helpful if you could write a song and actually get like a fair royalty rate on it,
Yeah.
streaming, and actually make some money that way. So that's something that could definitely stand to be fixed. Um, you know, touring, it's cool that it's still around. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing that it's still around in a way, because to go someplace in person versus stay home and watch it on your computer
Mm.
screen or whatever is, it's harder and harder.
Yeah.
I mean, home entertainment is phenomenal nowadays
Mhm.
compared to what it used to be. Now you have access to whatever you want to do or see right at
Mhm.
home.
Mhm.
And when I was a kid growing up, that wasn't the case. You know, we were
Yeah.
all the way back to the television, manually changing the five channels on your TV. That was about it. So obviously concerts were a bigger deal to go see back then. That wasn't something you had access to.
Yeah, I see. I see. Um, do you, in general, do you relate with the approach that musicians have nowadays in terms of whether it's composing, whether it's the missives that they have in their songs, whether there's approach to production, and all of that? Obviously, you sort of answered this question, but even from the perspective of not just a listener, but the professionals, do you see any points that you don't agree with, or that you find relatable to you personally? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on
I
that.
mean, I'd say technologically, a lot of that stuff is really, really great
Mhm.
and underrated. The fact that, I mean, when I was younger and I did my home recordings,
Mhm.
I was working on a 4-track with a cassette. And I
Yeah.
mean, nowadays to be able to make a professional sounding recording, even in something like GarageBand, which
Mhm.
comes as a standard, obviously, you know, application on a
Mhm.
Mac or any Apple device. I mean, it's that's great. I think that's awesome. And it gives people the ability to record better sounding music
Mhm.
right at home. I think the ability to, if you want to hire professional musicians to play on your stuff, and you can file share
Mhm.
and make recordings with players that, I mean, that's cool that that's something that's a reality for
Mhm.
people these days. I mean, when I was a kid, if I wanted to have any famous musician play on my material, there was
Yeah.
no way to achieve that. I mean, you'd have to like fly them into your hometown or something and go into a studio. And so I think that a lot of that stuff has actually been really, really positive. It gets a bad reputation a lot of times, but
Mhm.
in general, I think the technological aspect of recording and what
Mhm.
you're able to do is great. And that does inspire people to write and
Mhm.
make music. And I that stuff in general, I'm pretty positive on. It's just that the fact that people can't get paid for it, that's
Yeah.
that's difficult.